My name is KayAnn Miller, and I am honored to be here learning from all of you and all of our great speakers and presenters. And I hope this presentation provides some small nugget of information that you can take home with my gratitude for your teachings. There is so much exciting indigenous food sovereignty and food work going on in Montana. It's amazing. There are many, many people and organizations across the state doing this work, and we're all using very different approaches. So at Montana State, which as we know was designed as a colonizing institution, I actually am working inside the system just simply because that's where my own personal skills best lend themselves to food system restoration and recovery at this current time. So what we're going to look at today are two examples from Montana illustrating just a few ways that we're working in a big collaboration to bring foods into school systems. And we're not the only ones doing this work, of course. I know there are teachers here who are teaching about indigenous foods in their classrooms and chefs who are collaborating with various organizations and organizations here today that are bringing traditional foods into healthcare. We're all doing the work, and I thank you for that. In Montana, we would be remiss if we did not mention the Indigenous Food Lab, the Sioux Chef Company, and Natives. They have been with us from the very beginning in this work. Also, Dr. Walter Fleming and Drs. Wanyuan Cool, Jill Falcon-Mackin, and Kristen Rupel. We could not have gotten started without them. So indigenous food is a really great fit for MSU, even though maybe not everyone thinks so. But there are 12 tribes and 7 reservations in Montana. And we have kind of come to the conclusion that schools are a nutritional food hub for our young people, and that's why we're really focused on them. So in setting out this presentation and thinking about what we've done, the team decided that there's really 12 steps that we want to share with you today. So the university got itself a new mission, and they published it in 2019, and we all were looking at that, and we said, well, hey, we're integrating indigenous education. We're creating and recreating indigenous culinary knowledge among students and staff. And we're serving traditionally underserved communities. And these students are going home and taking this information back to their communities. So y'all ought to support us. And but that took a lot of talking and a lot of sharing and a lot of indigenous meals. But at the end, this was how the university articulated that back to us. And for those sitting in the middle and back where it's hard to read, this is a quote from the university's senior diversity and inclusion officer, and it says, "Serving indigenous foods on campus is one concrete way MSU can honor indigenous traditions, land, people, and ways of knowing. These efforts allow the community to learn from the indigenous lands on which we live, learn, and work, and from the indigenous peoples who have cared for and thrived on these lands for generations. Serving indigenous foods also offers an opportunity for the broader community to reflect on their relationship to indigenous lands and peoples." So as y'all know, inside a large system, you need something to stand on, some little piece of paper to hold up and say, okay, this is why we're doing it, and you all kind of need to get in line whether you want to or not. So this was that piece of paper for us. And once we had that step in place, then we were able to collaborate with Native American Studies and other organizations and go even further. So these are the Bobcat Singers. And Indigenous dinner in one of our, or drumming at an Indigenous dinner at one of our dining halls at MSU. When we do community dinners like this, we serve between the two dining halls that we have around 3,300 meals. 1,600 of those, more or less, are usually to students, so about a tenth of our student population. We do have a donor who makes the meals free to all Indigenous peoples in the community and on campus, and to our students and their families. The other 1,600 or so meals go to community members. And I heard somebody say, oh geez, when I said 3,200 or 3,300 meals. But, 1,600 community members is not very many of Montana's million folks, so we got a ways to go sharing this word here, but we'll get there. And I keep talking about we. This is truly a collaborative effort. We decided that the second step that we wanted to share was the importance of gathering up some really cool people. The man in the upper left there, we refer to him as the subversive. He went to work at MSU almost 30 years ago now. His name's E.J. Hook. And the brilliance of E.J. was that he was looking forward down those 7 generations. And this is what E.J. did. Every time a new plant relative needed to be put on campus, or there was a new building, and we have lots of those, and there was new landscaping to be done, E.J. put in indigenous edible plants. He didn't ask anybody, he didn't tell anybody, he just did it. So yeah, round of applause for E.J. So 20 years later, when some more of us go, hey, look at all these plants. We could be doing indigenous foods. That is thanks to E.J. As I mentioned, Dana Thompson and Sean Sherman were with us as teachers from the beginning. I was there. My best personality trait is I can't hear the word no. And we also have a marvelous, marvelous auntie. Everyone needs one of these. This is Jill Falcon Mackin, and she's posed there with her shovel in one of our now 4, soon to be 5 community gardens. And we weren't enough. This little covey of people was not enough. We found out pretty early on that we needed some champions besides me, inside our culinary services department, and we tried moving forward without this step, but it was really too hard. So you kind of got to be weasel and find people who support you. So this is Rich Huffman on your left. Super cool because he sanctioned all this work, and now he has moved on to the University of Montana, where he's doing the same project all over again. In the middle there is our chef, executive chef, Jill Flores, and the man who is now the director of culinary services, Mike Kasevich. And we really needed them to say, look, all you 300 food service employees, we are doing this, and you will do it. And that was very helpful. And with that, we were able to really get cooking. And we kind of wanted to meet people where they were. So we started using indigenous ingredients first in ways that we thought people might be familiar with. So on the left, we're making deviled eggs for Easter, a holiday that's celebrated on MSU campus, but we're doing it with duck eggs. And so once we kind of got going, then we were able to say, duck eggs are great, but it's not enough. And we moved to using traditional methods and teaching traditional methods to make our foods as best we could in these giant kitchens. And so In the middle here, we nixtamalize all our own corn that we need nixtamalized corn for on campus. And we teach people how to grind that corn, process it, roll their own tamales. All the tamales that we sell on campus or put out through the food system on campus are hand processed. We also recommend that you start small and expand slowly. We started just like this little tiny corn shoot here with one dinner in 2017. And people liked the food. We had spent all this time practicing and learning and training our front-facing people so that when you came up to them and said, hey, what's this? They actually knew. And they knew why we were doing it. And they knew how to do it in a traditional way, which I'll talk about later, did get us in a little bit of trouble. Good trouble. So we then expanded to the food truck. Then we went to a situation where we had indigenous foods out all the time in the dining halls somewhere. And so to put that in context, between our two dining halls on campus, on a slow day, we serve 10,000 meals. On a busier day, we might serve 12 to 14,000 meals. And so there's indigenous foods out all the time, but it's pretty quiet. And then we moved to where we're doing more things like with the Bobcat Singers so that it's not so quiet. And now we have in our dining halls, on certain days in each dining hall, while there's indigenous food out all throughout the dining hall, there's also a station that's doing only indigenous foods for that day. And we also had this little garden project going on the side, which was great because then when we got stalled out inside the system, we could come over and work in the garden. So we started with this little plot at Story Mill Park in Bozeman. And it doesn't look like much, and there were literally only 4 people who planted this garden. That would be Jill Mackin and her husband, myself, and my son, Zach, there. And Zach, for this whole first year, is grumbling, why aren't the rest of the indigenous people on campus out here doing something? Because he's 13 and he's not amused. Well, Zach, if you build it, they will come. This is not the planning session from last year. It changed on my screen. There you go. This is our spring planting at this particular garden from last spring. Almost all of the students that you see here are indigenous students at Montana State University. They're here with their family members. And they, with 1 or 2 adults in the room, mostly Jill Mackin, did the entire garden for the whole year. We also started just recently an ancestral seed garden at the Horticulture farm at MSU. And what we're doing here is those of our plant relatives that are at risk, that haven't been grown out for a long time, that might have seeds that are becoming less than viable, they're being grown out at this garden. And the best thing about this is what you see on your right-hand side there. We now, over the years, have had enough indigenous students working on these projects that all of the planting and all of the training about how to hand pollinate, how to propagate, how to harvest, how to hand thresh, and how to save these seeds are being taught to other students and community members by Native students. And these seeds are going into a seed bank in our new American Indian Hall. And then they go out, no charge, to, depending on how many seeds we have, around 150 to 200 families, indigenous families across Montana who are interested in caring for these seed lines and keeping them going. And we've just gotten bigger and bigger with the garden program. Again, Jill Falcon-Mackin, she's a PhD by this time. She is blessing the medicinal garden at our new American Indian Hall. And so that went in last fall. And this spring, as we all stand here and speak, there are true indigenous culinary gardens going in just behind Jill, where you can't see them there, that can be used by any student, any faculty, anyone in the community, but they're also being used in the Gallatin Valley College culinary program on campus. And for the 5th year, it has taken us forever to bring them on board, but for the first year, those ancestral foods are coming into the kitchens and they are teaching and traditional food preparation in the culinary school. So there did come a point one day when we had to have some heavier hitters on board to help us out. So this is Dr. Waded Cruzado, who's the president of the university. And there were a couple of times where she had to pick up the phone and say, yeah, this is really important to me, this is happening. And the saying on campus is, what Waded wants, what Waded gets. So that was very helpful to us. She's getting ready to record a presentation for us to the National Association of College and University Food Systems, sharing about how important what is happening on campus is and why other colleges around the country should do this. In the upper right-hand corner, the elder sitting down there is John Austin, and he spent pretty much from the time he was 20, he's like, I don't know, 65-ish there, traveling around Montana and collecting seeds of cultivars that were traditionally grown there that are suited to the environment, and growing out those seeds as he could and protecting them. And here he's gifting them to our student members of the Montana Indigenous Food Sovereignty Initiative. And so the students are actually the ones who are the seed keepers for these seeds and who are planting them every year and growing them out. And this day he's also teaching Buffalo Bird Woman's mounding style to the students. And last year the whole garden was done as if it was Buffalo Bird Woman's garden to her size specifications and planning specifications. The other thing, I gotta go back because we couldn't have done it without the dude in the middle circle there. So he's the MSU sanitarian, and he gets to say what comes into MSU food systems and what doesn't. And when we started this project, none of EJ's lovely plants could come into the MSU food system because that's against the rules. And it's against the rules at the county level and the state level. So that's a problem. So Dustin and EJ worked together for over a year with the county people and the state people. How are we gonna fix this? What are we gonna figure out? And the conclusion that they came to was they would certify the entire campus as a farm so that any plants on it could be harvested for individual or food system use, and that's what we did. So, we've got this giant 2,000-acre farm. It's awesome. And the man down in the right-hand corner, so this ancestral seed garden, to start it out, none of us know how to pollinate corn and keep it all bagged and separate so that it doesn't cross-pollinate, so these seed lines can be restored. Water is an issue, soil health is an issue, land, just space, is an issue. So he runs the horticulture, MSU horticulture farm, which is pretty good size, and he just turned over a piece of the farm that's about the size of this room to this Ancestral seed garden effort, and he provided all the water and the soil amendments, and he continues to provide all the staffing that it takes to keep this garden going at free of charge. So Creator bless that man. The other thing that we would suggest is that you just integrate yourself in everywhere that you can. So you can't see it because this picture is taken high up, but the food truck is nestled down there between the teepee and the president's office during Indigenous Peoples Week. We actually drive the food truck into the powwow, the big powwow building that we use, and we provide Indigenous foods during our powwows. And we've just kept building our partnerships. We've done that through chef's tables. We've done that through training supported by the Center of American Indian Rural Health Equity. Anywhere we can find a friend, we'll take one. We'll take a friend. We also committed early on that we would engage with and learn from all our relatives. Because just because I know a Potawatomi way of doing something doesn't mean that Danny's Humscapi Picani way or Angela's Crow way is not better. And so we have tried to integrate as many students and plant relatives and elders into this work as we can. We've also worked really hard to engage the campus community, whether it's science classes, whether it's College of Arts and Architecture, helping us, having students help us do signage for all the Indigenous gardens, whether it's going out in Bozeman, this is on Main Street at our community restaurant, and we actually donated and do donate annually an entire Indigenous dinner prepped by MSU staff as a fundraiser for our community members without housing in Bozeman. And we found as we were meeting, isn't that nice how the E just drops down to the next line there? We also found as we were collaborating that if we can collaborate around something that's really exciting to the group that we're trying to engage, it really helps. So this is the gentleman in the front is a part of Montana Pro Start. It's a high school culinary arts program supported in Montana by the Montana Restaurant and Hospitality Association and at the national level by the National Restaurant Association. And we have a hospitality school at MSU. We really wanted to engage them. We really wanted to engage the hospitality community and begin getting Indigenous foods down into high schools. So we threw this big dinner, and we included MSU Culinary Services, Gallatin Valley Culinary Arts Program, all the Pro Starts across the state. And Chef Sean came and taught Indigenous foods, and we threw this big fundraiser dinner that brings ProStart students to the culinary program where they can now learn Indigenous foods. And we had some problems. You do get stuck. You know, it takes, if you get the food truck stuck like that, it takes about 10 grand and 10 hours to get it out. I don't recommend it. That was me driving too, it was terrible. So we've learned a lot of things along the way, and even though we now engage with elders to make sure that it's not just students sharing their knowledge with us, but they're getting knowledge transferred back that they can hold and bring forward, there are people on campus who are really worried about this project because first of all, it's an institution, and secondly, it does kind of smack of cultural co-option. So we worked collaboratively with them, and what we worked out is that we wouldn't do Blackfeet foods or Crow foods or Salish foods. We would do Indigenous foods that were indigenous to the Americas prior to 1492. And we agreed on that because nobody could remember what their auntie and grandmothers were making in 1492 or how they were doing it. So we could all kind of come together and just say, hey, this food was here. It's healthy, it's nutritious. Here's a cool way to eat it if you're interested. So we have worked with that. We have more to do, I'm sure. And so now we're starting this process in K through 12 schools. We're following the same process. We're lining up with the state constitution that says you must provide Indian education for every student in Montana. We've got a team of people who are doing all the recipe development. That's Mariah Gladstone with IndigiKitchen. She's doing all the recipe development for us. She's in the middle there. So to get into the schools, the recipes have to be very specific. They have to be in a certain format. They have to be able to be scaled up and scaled down and still work. And they have to have all of the nutrition data with them. So that's being worked on. We also just this year got a Harvest of the Month program, which is run by Montana Farm to School, which is a government agency, to feature bison. May is Bison Month, and I'm gonna put that YouTube video back up at the end because it's lovely. It's Native people all across Montana talking in their language about how they say bison and why bison are important. And this runs in every school that participates in the Harvest of the Month program. For Montana No Kid Hungry, my other hat, which is supported by Share Our Strengths National No Kid Hungry program, we started really simple. We just added an Indigenous food category to our Montana School Eats program. And we've been doing that for 3 years now, and that finally got us an invitation this year to work with our tribal collaborators and teach Indigenous foods, nutrition, and health at the Montana School Nutrition Association. We finally found somebody deep in the heart of the Office of Public Instruction, and luckily she does all the food purchasing for USDA's school nutrition plan. So there's a lot of rules about food in schools, and one of the things is you need to purchase off the USDA list. And it's not even as awesome as the FDIPR list. So what we did is we started out with Pam, and we just went through and marked all the things on the list that were Indigenous. And then we are working on procurement through some grants with the Intertribal Ag Council and some other organizations to actually make it possible to procure tribal foods to go into that program using USDA money. And we also have co-hosted a food service directors conference with every food service director, including from tribal nations across the state, to talk about nutrition and mental health and why their students need these foods in their school lunch. There's added challenges when you working with the state on top of MSU. Yeah, there's just a lot going on, and pretty soon all these challenges look like a big old fat roadblock. So we decided that we could either be mouse and try to learn from mouse and try to work our way through that tiny little white dot on the screen, or we could pick this off one at a time. So right now we're working on mindsets with the food service directors and now the Montana Nutrition School Nutrition Association, and we're also working on scratch cooking because horribly, Montana had moved to a situation where there was no scratch cooking going on in lots of schools, and so they don't even have the equipment anymore. And so thanks to No Kid Hungry, we are providing grants to schools to retool those kitchens so that this can actually happen. And I'd love to talk to you while you're here and learn from you. So please, I don't have a yellow jacket. I didn't get the memo. But look me up, and thank you.